Hello and welcome to this internet retailing webinar with Log Me In. We're looking today at digital customer engagement and how that can transform your business. We live in an age of messaging, and while people do still pick up the phone or send emails to companies, there's also myriad other ways of being engaged with consumers. And we're lucky enough to be joined today by Sandra Schroeter from Log Me In, who's going to talk us through how they did some work with Forrester to look at how customer engagement sort of is going with companies. They did a survey amongst 500 companies and mapped out some sort of metrics to sort of really measure sort of the maturity line of customer engagement, and I've come up with some really interesting findings. And today we're going to hear what they found, and more importantly, how that relates to what you as retailers out there listening can do to improve and work on and develop your digital interaction for customer service, for sales, for all sorts. So I'll be handing over to Sandra shortly. Just a word of housekeeping for those listening. We will be taking questions, but we'll use those at the end of the presentation to save interrupting the flow. So if you type in your questions, we'll come to those in the Q&A section at the end. The webinar is being recorded and will be available for download on the Internet Retailing website towards the end of this week. It'll also be, I imagine, available on Log Me In's website too. Anyone who registered for it will receive a link to that download as a matter of course, and feel free to share it with your friends, family, colleagues, and anyone else because it's such an interesting topic. So that's enough from me. I'm Paul Scull. I'm one of the editors at Internet Retailing. I'll be chairing this, sticking my oar in where appropriate. And but really, you need to hear from Sandra, who I shall be handing over to now to present. So Sandra, over to you.
Thank you, Paul, and good afternoon, everybody. As Paul said, my name is Sandra Schroeter, and I'll be taking you through this presentation and discussion today. I would like to start out with a short agenda so you know what's coming. We're going to start with an introduction to the customer expectations today in what Forrester calls the age of the customer. We will then look at the Forrester maturity model that Paul mentioned, that we developed to understand how companies are different in their maturity of customer engagement, and the 3 insights we got from the research we did. The first insight, sneak peek here, the first insight is that the maturity gap between the less mature and the very mature companies is widening. Insight 2 is that increasing maturity, no matter where you are, if you increase your maturity, that will have measurable benefits, and we'll be looking at what those are. Insight 3 is that companies, or the experts of companies with very high maturity, what are they doing differently from the others? And one insight is that they're using artificial intelligence to drive customer engagement. And then last step is somewhat more practical. I have some examples of companies that work with Bolt 360, which I think we haven't mentioned the product name yet. So if I speak about Bolt 360, that's our digital customer engagement platform. So we have a couple of real life examples. And then at the end, I have 5 steps for you that you can take to drive your customer engagement maturity. So that was the agenda for today. And I would like to start with a survey. This, I know you haven't heard anything yet, so this is quite a simple one. At what stages in the customer journey does your organization offer web chat? We do not offer web chat at any stage of the journey. We use it to gather information, or we allow our customers to gather information through web chat. We have our customers provide checkout support, or we offer web chat for deliveries, returns, and exchanges, or we offer web chat for leaving feedback.
Excellent. So vote now. It's on your screens. I see many of you have. I'll just leave it running for another few seconds if anyone's just making up their minds. Okay, right. We seem to have. Oh no, a couple of last-minute votes.
Yeah, still some coming.
Let's. We'll give you a few more seconds just in case There are other people still making up their minds. Right, that seems to
And I
have
can already see what's happening.
stabilised. I think let's close the poll. I'm closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and there we go. So let's share the results. So that's what we found. What do you make of
Yeah,
that?
so yeah, 45% not using any type of chat in the customer journey. It is maybe not representative of the entire field, but it's what we see in these webinars because people really want to learn how they can get started. But I think it's actually quite good that 27% use it to provide information. We also have checkout support and leaving feedback. It's really interesting to see that there's no support for deliveries, returns, and exchanges, especially as we're talking to retailers today. We'll see how that changes and see if retailers later on in the presentation, if retailers are using chatbots or some type of self-service to help their customers along the way. But let's keep moving, Paul.
Okay, there we go. We're back to the presentation.
Yes, fantastic. So we are talking in the beginning of this presentation, we're talking about customer expectations and why we as consumers expect what we expect. And the iPhone here is representative really of any smartphone and the technology it represents. The iPhone was introduced in 2007, and that's only 12 years ago. But for me, my whole life is in my phone, and I do everything with my phone. I book holidays, I check my bank account, I sort out problems with my telephone provider, I chat with my friends. It's all on my phone, not even to speak about my calendar and some old-fashioned applications. And I know that a lot of people can relate to that because they also have their phone, and it's when they lose it, you can really see what the phone means to people when they lose it. But anyway, I'm distracting here. So it all started with the introduction of the iPhone in 2007, and it kind of conditioned consumers to expect immediate value, whether that is delivery on Prime or whether that's streaming of films on Netflix or Amazon or Spotify, or when we're hungry, we order. I'm here in the center of London. If I wanted food from Deliveroo or Just Eat, it would take 15-20 minutes and I'd have my food. And that's not enough. We've now introduced devices like Alexa, Google Home. I just bought some bulbs over the weekend, and I can now tell my Alexa to turn on the light, and it's really amazing. And this experience is something that consumers now expect. And I have one example of my own personal experience with a bank called Starling Bank. They're getting more and more known in the UK. They offer some really good rates for currency conversion when you travel abroad. And for those who are wondering where my accent is from, some people think it's from South Africa, but it's actually German. So when I go back to Germany or Europe, I like to pay with my Starling Bank card. The experience that I had with them is I went to their website, they recommended download the app. I downloaded the app, all went smoothly. I put in my name, my address, my telephone number, and my email address, and my date of birth on one screen. So that was, let's say, a minute. And on the second screen, they asked me to record a short video of myself saying that I'm a Starling customer and my name. And then they asked me to take a photo of my passport. And as soon as I hit submit, I got a text message saying, we received your application. Once processed, you will have the card within 2 days. And I did. So at that time, I thought, wow, because the last time I applied for a bank account was 5 years ago when I moved to the UK. And I remember that it was a lot of paperwork and it definitely wasn't done in 5 minutes. So now this raises the bar so much, and it doesn't just raise the bar for banking, but it raises the bar for the customer experience that I'm now expecting from other companies, whether that's insurance companies, retailers, telephone companies, any. And Paul, we were chatting about this earlier. I think you had your own example of my Starling
Yeah,
bank
well,
example.
I've had many similar examples. Monzo Bank, yes, I had a very similar sort of setting up experience where it's just so easy, and they use all the sort of facilities of the phone is what I like about it. You take a photo of your passport, you do a sort of video of your face that it then uses for sort of security purposes. It's really, it's leveraging the technology that particularly younger people are just take as for granted. I think that the thing that I find interesting about this is that some retailers do offer things like sort of live chat as soon as you go onto their website. Can I help you find that? I've had a sort of some ongoing sort of issues with British Telecom and my router. But what I've noticed about it that's quite good this time around in upgrading my router is that there's a live chat box that I can just converse with someone,
Mm-hmm.
and I find that really easy. It's much easier than having to be on hold and have a phone call eventually with someone, because I can get on with other stuff while I'm waiting. What I think is interesting in my own sort of behaviour is I now sort of expect this from all retailers and brands that I deal with, and some do it and many don't. And I am starting to find that if I need to know something before I buy it, I tend to go to places where I can get that experience, where I can sort of engage with a chat bot of some
Mm.
sort. Because it's a much more convenient and slightly sort of non-linear way of interacting. Like wanting to know something about a product isn't necessarily like my main objective of the day. I've got to do that while I've got to do all
Mm.
the other things. And I think even from my perspective, I'm starting to shift my behavior based on that. And I think that is testament really to how easily consumers' views on engagement are
Mm.
changed, and how this is going to be the norm in a matter of months rather than a matter of years.
Mm.
So yeah, the likes of BT do it. Um, Deal with a sort of packaging and stationery company called Raja, who also do it very effectively. And a few of the other retailers do, particularly sort of those that are starting to get into it in the sort of fast fashion market. They quickly onto you as to sort of how can I help you. And yeah, I think it's interesting how it's sort of evolved very quickly, and now it's what I expect. And I think give it 6 months, it's what everyone will expect. And I
Mm.
guess that's what makes your research so interesting.
I think you made some really good points. I picked up a couple of keywords in there, like convenience, and that's something that consumers are expecting. You said easy, and it's really what Forrester describes in this term, the age of the customer. It means that we as consumers, we have so much choice today that if we don't like the service or the products that one brand provides us, we can easily go and buy that type of service or product from another brand. So if you are on one side of the puzzle, then customer attrition or customer churn is a problem. If you're on the other side where you have a lot of new customers, then obviously that's to your benefit. But today, because of this choice, customer experience really becomes one of those big differentiators. And that's what we wanted to look into with this study that we conducted with Forrester, specifically on the topic of customer engagement. And before we went to Forrester, we drew up this, well, very simple drawing of groups of companies that we saw in the market. And we said, okay, how do we classify them? And we saw companies that were not mature yet. We call them the experimenters. They typically use the telephone channel as their either main or only channel. Then there's evolutionists who use some digital channels, but they might not have a KPI that spans across those digital channels, which might lead to an experience of a customer giving them a call and sending them an email and getting a different response. Enthusiasts are those that have already implemented digital channel. They're seeing success and they want to continue with that journey. And then experts are really the ones that are using a multi-channel approach. They're looking at a holistic picture, and they have KPIs that span across those different channels. I know I haven't given you the full picture of where these companies sit on, but I would be interested in with the information I've given you so far, where are you, or where is your company at in this customer engagement journey? Are you an experimenter? Are you an evolutionist, an enthusiast? Or are you saying, I'm just here because I need an hour break from my day. I'm an expert and I can tell you how this works.
Okay, well, the poll is up, so as you did previously, vote on this one, whether you're an experimenter, an evolutionist, an enthusiast, or indeed an expert.
We do have some experts on the call, which is great, yeah. So no matter where you are, if you want to put anything in the chat or share an experience, feel free to do that at any time. Same applies for your questions that we'll address afterwards.
Okay, let's, I think we're nearly there. Let's close down the poll. I think we've stabilized. Right, I'm closing the poll now. And there are the results, Sandra. A lot of enthusiasts, which is good to see.
Yeah, which is really good to see. When we do these webinars, oftentimes we have a lot of experimenters and evolutionists on the phone. We've just recently done a very similar webinar like this in Australia and Germany, and the distribution was a little bit different. So I'd be very interested in the questions that we get at the end, and maybe we can also have some comments and people sharing their experience and how it's going. So thank you for that insight, and we'll keep moving along.
Okay, let's clear that, and you're back on. It'd be interesting to see how that tallies with your own research, that I know we're coming to in a slide's time. But yes, onwards.
Onwards. So this is the model that we created behind the categories, and we looked at 4 different pillars, we call them: strategy, process, people, and technology. And we conducted this research twice: 2017 the first time, and then 2018 the second time. And what we were really interested in was the difference, or the progress, that we made between 2017 and 2018. And there's when you look at this, what you'll see is that there's one criteria within every category, which is AI. AI strategy, AI processes, AI organization, and AI technology. And that is a criteria that we added in 2018, because we saw that that technology was really making progress between 17 and 18. That was also the time when we added artificial intelligence to Bolt 360. So hence that change. And what we saw in the research, that it was that we have this distribution of experimenters, 22%, 29% evolutionists, enthusiasts, and experts. And this we took as the base, or the benchmark. So when we did the survey in 2018, we expected that just everybody would move to the right, because we expected that they had matured. But when we actually conducted the survey, it was quite surprising, because that is not what we saw. What we actually saw is that the group of experimenters grew, and the group of experts grew, and the groups in the middle, they actually shrunk. So what that means to us, and this is one of the first insights from this research, is that the gap between the less mature and the more mature companies was growing from 2017 to 2018. So that was insight 1. The maturity gap is widening, and now in this slide we want to look into the different categories. And the number 2017 number is the blue number, And the green number is the 2018 number, and this is the gap between the group on the left and the group on the right, so between the experimenters and the experts. And the gap grew in 3 categories, which are strategy, process, and organization. Interestingly, it didn't grow, the gap didn't grow in the technology category, but it was already quite wide. So it was at 45% difference in 2017 and at 45% in 2018. And we looked a bit more into detail why that could be. And what we found is that in the survey 2017 and 2018, the experts said that AI and technology were an enabler for their customer experience strategy and customer engagement strategy. And the experimenters, they rather saw it as a burden. They knew it was there, they knew they had to do something with it because everybody else was looking at it, but they didn't really know how to apply this technology. The second insight was that there are what we call quantifiable benefits of increasing maturity. This was really a hypothesis that we had because we strongly believed that increasing customer experience and customer engagement maturity would also have an impact on the bottom line. And the survey proved that hypothesis on several KPIs. We only have 4 here: NPS, the Net Promoter Score, conversion rate, revenue increase, and order size. But we also looked at other values like customer lifetime value, employee satisfaction. We also looked at cost savings, and we saw across the bench, no matter what KPI we looked at, we saw an improvement. And we saw an improvement not just from going from an experimenter to an expert, because that's actually, if that was your vision, that's fine. If that was your, let's say, 2020 plan, that might be difficult to achieve. But the good news in this really is that you don't have to move straight from an experimenter to an expert, or we have many evolutionists and enthusiasts here on the webinar. It's more likely for them to get to the expert stage in the coming months. But again, you don't have to go from left to right. No matter where you are today, if you just increase your level of maturity by one group, there will be a benefit to that change. And Paul, what's your experience in the retail sector? What are the KPIs that are being measured, and what successes do you see with customer engagement and customer experience?
I think what's interesting and what you sort of see in the retail sector particularly is that largely they're sort of experimenters and evolutionists. What's interesting about your findings, I think, is that even by being an experimenter, you can have sort of demonstrable improvements. Now, for retailers, obviously, the bottom line is really their key KPI, you know, sort of, well, I guess driving revenue increases and order size are really what sort of drives what they measure. And I think you're already starting to see, for some retailers, you are beginning to see engagement strategies paying off. The likes of boohoo.com doing really well, mainly through having the right engagement strategy with its audience. It understands its audience in a really sort of granular way and taps into them perfectly. I would say that they, though, if you look at what they do in terms of customer engagement, are probably at best evolutionists, possibly still, you know, largely experimenters, but they're managing to get you know, a sort of 43% increase in sales over the first half of this year, countered, you know, by looking at someone like Forever 21, who've gone out of business because they, in a similar line of business, didn't really have like, an engagement strategy at all. So
yeah, they're still doing well in Mexico, it seems, but yeah, I did read the news this morning.
They're pulling out of Asia, they're pulling out of the European markets, they've filed bankruptcy, I think, here in the UK. They just don't have that. I think what we see from those that get it is that they've got not only the engagement technology and the engagement strategy, but they have they know what data to gather on their consumers so that they can make that strategy work. And I think that when you look at some that you don't have to be the most sophisticated in terms of using engagement technology, but if you use what you've got well, and you know, make it a strategic part of your business, you can make significant gains. And I guess the maturity model is interesting, because if you can make good gains while being an experimenter or an evolutionist, as you move through being an enthusiast and then into an expert, you are going to hopefully pull away from your competitors. So I think for the retail customers, definitely are experimenters, and I think some are starting to reap the rewards of that experimentation, and I expect we'll see others. I think the ones that are falling by the wayside are those that don't even really experiment with engagement, still trapped in the sort of old world of how they interact with their customer base.
Yeah, and what you said there is something that we'll come to later as well. You said that you have to engage with your customers the way they want, and you have to address the questions that they want answered. So in the 5 steps at the end, I will speak a little bit about finding the right use case. And I think it's really important to understand what are the challenges that your customers have. A lot of companies do customer journey mapping, or they do research, and that is not only helpful, it's really required to understand what is it that my customers are struggling with. And when you know what they're struggling with, you can then find a solution. And this type of technology, customer engagement technology, addresses a very specific problem that we'll take a look at in a few slides. So coming to insight number 3 is that experts are doing a few things differently from everybody else. And they're doing 4 things differently. We'll look further into artificial intelligence, but I don't want to neglect the other areas either. So one area is customer experience, where I've already mentioned customer journey mapping or third-party research. That's what experts do more than the other groups, and they also rely on third-party insight to really understand their customers and the reason, the why should they be changing parts of the customer journey. Then in terms of revenue and conversion, experts do a lot more proactive outreach, and they also look at their agents differently, or their employees differently. They some of this criteria is technological, so they give them the right tools to be productive, but they also enable their employees to make decisions, and they give them career opportunities. So everything, or 2 out of 3 have nothing to do with technology. It's purely the agent or the human experience. And then the last category is artificial intelligence, and that's what we'll want to look into in a little bit more detail. For those companies that we interviewed and that attributed their NPS gains, we want to understand what they attribute their NPS gains to, and in this category for NPS and customer satisfaction, technologies like AI are the biggest driver of those NPS gains. You'll see, again, some of the other categories in here, like competitive research, customer research, packaging changes, journey mapping, but really it's significant that so many chose technology and artificial intelligence. We did the same thing for revenue and conversion, and again we asked them which of the following strategies have you utilized to achieve increased revenue conversion. The first one here is proactive customer engagement, so that has to do with that group of conversion. And number 2 here is, again, artificial intelligence, really showing the importance that AI has on NPS as well as revenue. And I think we have another survey at this point, because we're starting to talk about chatbots. So this is a very similar question to the first question we had today, but instead of relating to web chat or live chat, this question relates to chatbots. So what we would like to know is at what stages in the customer journey does your organization offer chatbots?
And the poll is now live, so vote away. It's looking like a two-horse race currently, but oh no.
Yes. Oh no, there's a.
No, that's there are. Yes, there we go. There we are. That's that was looking very very binary there for a moment. What people were and weren't doing. So we're getting sort of a reasonably good spread. Well, we'll see the results shortly. Let's see. Numbers are slowly ticking up. I think we've got all we're going to get. Oh, any more? I shall shut the poll in a couple more seconds. If you haven't voted, vote now. Okay, I'm closing the poll, and there are the results. So
I think
again, no one using it for deliveries, returns, and exchanges, which is interesting.
It is very interesting indeed. Well, no, so I didn't want to say it earlier, but we have a similar example of this. I'm going to show a chatbot in a few moments that Dyson uses for product recommendations or the product selection. But they started with another chatbot, which was for product troubleshooting of their vacuum cleaners. And their aim was to help people fix their vacuum cleaners without getting in touch with Dyson, because it's a lot faster. And some of the problems are so simple to solve. It's just following the troubleshooting steps. But what they found is when they looked at the data, and that's the nice thing that the artificial intelligence does, it gives you all the data and it shows the questions that customers are asking. And they found in the data that a lot of customers are asking about deliveries, returns, and exchanges. And they've now integrated with their order management system, and their chatbot now answers questions about orders, and they really see that that is used a lot. So I'd be interested in seeing once you deploy technology like this, whether deliveries are an area for you to use chatbots for and integrate with your order management system. So that might be a real opportunity. And I mean, for those 50% that don't have any chatbots at all, I'm sure that we can give you some inspiration over the next couple of slides where they could be of value to you.
Absolutely, I think so. Right, so I shall hide the results now if we've analysed those enough, and we can move on with the presentation.
Yeah, so this slide shows where we are with customer engagement today. And those of you who already use chatbot technology, this might be your yesterday, but this is what we see in general. So we have on the left side, the user gets in touch with us, whether that's email, chat, messaging, and those tickets or engagements are routed based on rules to an agent. The agent has access to a knowledge base or 2 or 3. I met someone at a conference once. They did an exercise. The gentleman went into his call center and he sat next to his agents for a day, and he looked at how many tools and knowledge bases are they using to do their job. And the astonishing number he came up with was, I think, 28. So not saying everybody has those 28 knowledge bases and systems, but that is in line with a finding that we had in another study. 25% of the agent's time is spent on finding information. And this is really something that we'll see on 2 slides down, that artificial intelligence can help with that. On the right side of this chart, you see third-party systems. That could be, I already mentioned your order management system. It could be a CRM system. So they have access to those systems, but in many cases, they're not integrated with the agent workspace. This causes users and consumers a lot of frustration. I call these the frustration drivers, and this is from a survey we conducted with consumers globally. I think, yeah, these are the European numbers. 31% said that they had to repeat themselves to more than one advisor as their query was escalated. If we put ourselves in the shoes of a consumer that is handed from one agent to another, we, I think, can probably all relate to that being quite annoying. 29% said that their problem took too long to solve, and 22% said that they had difficulty to getting to the right person with the right skill. And this is something that is attributed to the setup of customer engagement that we have today that I just showed in the slide before. So the question is, and the question that I want to answer is, how does artificial intelligence help us improve that customer engagement journey? And this is pretty much the same slide, but we're adding artificial intelligence at different stages. So on the very left, we can have what it says here, NLU, natural language understanding and natural language processing, which allows a machine to understand the way we talk. That's why we call it natural language understanding instead of computer language. And it gives us the ability to provide conversational AI, and that can be known as an AI chatbot, but it could also be technology like dynamic FAQs and intelligent search bars. I have an example of that on one of the next slides. Then instead of using rule-based routing, we can use smart routing so that inquiries or engagements are routed to an agent, or they are routed to an integration with a third-party system so that users can self-serve and just perform simple tasks that have been automated through the interface of a chatbot. If the inquiry is routed to an agent because either the chatbot doesn't know the answer, or if a consumer or user would like to speak to a human, then the agent gets that conversation through live chat seamlessly in the same window, and the artificial intelligence will stay in the conversation and read the questions the customer is sending, and if it has the answer to one of those questions, it will automatically suggest that to the agent, so really saving the agent a lot of time trying to find that information. So this is where artificial intelligence can help, and I brought a couple of examples of what that looks like in real life. The first example is from an Indian bank, ICICI, the second largest consumer bank in India. And the reason I brought this example is not because of the use case, but because of the journey they took. So what they have here is the intelligent FAQs. And what that means is that I assume a lot of you already have FAQs on the website, but typically what we see is that those aren't updated regularly. And again, I spoke to someone at a conference, I think it was 2 weeks ago in London, and he said, well, I made up our FAQs 3 years ago, not completely randomly, but it was what I thought customers wanted to know. But the technology here allows you to first ask questions the way you would ask questions to a human. So starting with how can I check my balance? How can I make a direct debit, for example? And then if you go further down, you will see that frequently asked questions really in a dynamic order based on popularity. And the natural language understanding allows customers to ask questions, and it will understand the intent. Why is a customer asking this question? What information is he looking for, so that now the AI can surface the right answer to this customer question. This is a very simple implementation addressing a lot of your frequently asked questions, which means probably a high volume of questions that you regularly get, and it improves the findability of that content. That was their first step because it was an easy step to start with. In a second step, they said, okay, we're taking the same knowledge base and making that available to customers and consumers in a chat widget. So this is a button that sits on every page, and consumers and customers can interact with that button and then ask these types of questions to the chatbot on every single page. It uses the same knowledge base, it uses the same technology, it's just a different way to get to this information. And then step 3 was an integration with their transactional system. So once you were logged in, you could ask questions about your account, like what is my balance or what is my last direct debit? And transferring this experience to retail, and I know nobody's using this for returns and orders yet, but customers could ask, where's my latest order? The system would automatically, okay, this is the latest order. We shipped it yesterday, depending on your shipment terms and where it's shipped to. You could say, well, should be arriving today. This is the link to track your parcel. Or it even tells you, well, your package is 10 stops away if that is information that you have access to. So to summarize, ICICI started with the intelligent FAQ. Then they made that same content available through a chat widget, and then they added that transactional capability. I brought another real life example from Vodafone, and they are using the smart and dynamic FAQs as well. So this is what we see here. This is a list of dynamic FAQs sorted by the order of frequency. And what we see here is a customer asking, how do I turn on my GPS? And the NLP understood what the customer wanted to do, and it's asking, well, what device do you have? And we're selecting an iPhone 6 here, and then it will give us that answer. We jumped straight into asking another question, how do I turn on Bluetooth? And it remembers, like you can see here, that we have an iPhone 6, so it will give us the right content for our device. And the last real-time example I have from Dyson, I already mentioned that they have a troubleshooting bot and a bot that now answers questions about deliveries and returns. But this is a different use case that I'm showing in this example. I don't know which of you are familiar with the Dyson Airwrap. It's, as I hear, a very, very good hairstyling product for people with long hair. And it is not the cheapest. It's worth the money, I hear, but it's not the cheapest. So Dyson really wants to make sure that consumers pick the right model because they don't want to have the returns. They don't want to have unhappy customers because they picked the wrong one. So what they decided to do is they developed this product selection survey, or very quick 5 questions about the type of hair a person has. And then based on those 5 questions, it will give the customer a recommendation. This is the right Airwrap for you. So making sure that people pick the right one, increasing customer satisfaction and reducing the number of returns. This is the last demo that I have for today, which shows you not the customer experience, but shows you how the agents work with this interface. And on the left side, you see that a chat came in. Oh, this isn't running. I'm sorry for that. I'll just talk you through it anyway, because we see everything on this slide. So on the left side, you see that a chat comes in, or an engagement comes in. And in the column next to it, you see it's Ian Montgomery, and he's asked the chatbot question. He said, can you show me my latest booking? And the chatbot pulls out the booking from the transactional system. It was a holiday in Malta, and the customer now wants to add a car rental. So this is now transferred to an agent. The agent sees the whole history, and the agent says, well, hello. And then what you see in the column to the right of it is what we call Smart Advisor, and that's really the AI staying in the conversation and reading the next question the customer asks. So this is about car rental, and the customer speaking about that they're used to driving on the right-hand side, but now they have to drive on the left-hand side. So Smart Advisor suggests content that, that the agent can send to the customer straight away. If the agent isn't happy with the suggestion, the agent can provide feedback. It can give a thumbs up, a thumbs down. If he gives a thumbs down, then he can specify what is it that we have to improve about this content. And this is really how the artificial intelligence learns, by the agent feedback, as well as something that I mentioned earlier. By looking into the data and the questions that are being asked, we can track whether an answer was good or an answer was bad or an answer doesn't exist at all. So based on that information, content managers can create new content and agents can improve existing content. And then to cover off the last column in this view, which is the visitor information, this is where you would integrate with your CRM system, for example, or any of your other systems that has an API and contains important information about a specific customer. And you can also see the visitor history, showing you any previous chats that we've had with this particular customer. So it's really meant to be the one interface that your agents work with, helping customers to get faster answers and improving agent productivity. So I apologize for not showing the video itself. If you're interested in seeing that video, please get in touch with us and I'll make sure you get the whole recording of this demo. So this almost concludes the presentation. So we're going to go in the question and answer session in 2 or 3 minutes. So if you haven't asked your question yet, please add it to the chatbot. I'm so in love with chatbots. No, into the chat box, and we'll answer the question at the end. Or if you have any comments, please provide those as well. But now let's look into the 5 steps to get started with AI for customer engagement. And those of you who've already done this, I'd be very happy to continue the conversation about where you are and how we can take you up a level in the maturity curve. But it would also be interesting to see if this is how you approached your own journey. So to get started, identify a simple use case. So I said it's important to understand what are you trying to fix in your customer journey. A lot of people start with the use case of frequently asked questions, whether they already have them or if they don't have them, if they go to their contact center and speak to the agents, they can either ask them what are the 10 questions you get 5 times every day, or you can ask them to just write down every question for a day and build your frequently asked questions like that. But if you do that, it means that you're covering a lot of volume that you can answer without human interaction, and you can automate those questions, which helps you really to, first of all, free up your agents and serve your customers quicker. So you can make that available to your customers through the intelligent FAQ, or you can make that available through a chatbot, whichever use case you think is best for your users. You then need to get buy-in from necessary stakeholders. And I mention this because if you decide to go with a chatbot, we do recommend that you offer a path to a human, ideally live chat. And if you decide to do that, then that means that you need to have a team to staff that live chat. And that means that you'll have to be in touch with your operations manager, contact center manager. And that makes the planning, it doesn't make it difficult, but it just adds complexity to the planning. If you're planning to go with the simple FAQs, that is just a technology solution that doesn't at that point require any live agents. Define objectives and set expectations. It sounds so simple, but what we find is that you get stakeholder buy-in at this stage, and you then plan to do additional work, like adding a chat widget, adding additional functionality, like an integration with the order management system or the CRM, or something you see in the data that would help you automate some of your journeys. Defining the objectives, implementing the solution, and then measuring success, that will give you the buy-in to allow you to do those bigger projects and expanding the use cases. At the end, I wanted to mention a couple of companies that we work with and that we have case studies for. So probably of specific interest to this group of people, we have the North Face and Zalando, but we also have use cases from RBS, which obviously belongs to the financial services sector, but the use case that they have is not a customer-facing one. They have a use case where, well, they do have a customer-facing one, but in addition to that, they have a use case where their advisors are equipped with an iPad. So if I go to a branch and I have a question that the advisor cannot answer straight away, they have their iPad with a chatbot available to them called My Knowledge. And this is something that could be transferred to the retail industry for in-store experiences and helping advisors in-store to access the right information. Vodafone, we saw an example of. Intuit is a software vendor. Belfius, again, is bank and insurance. But there's a wide range of use cases that we see with our customers. And if you have something specific in mind where you say, well, this is my challenge and I'd like to address that with this technology, how could that look? Then please feel free to get in touch, or maybe you've already asked the question in the chat, so let's see what we got.
Lovely, Sandra, thank you. That's very interesting. It's really good stuff. I'd like to know more about what particularly the North Face and Zalando have done in this area, but we can follow that up later. We've got a few questions. Some of them are quite similar, so it's probably best to sort of lump them together. A lot more to do with the kind of practicalities of implementing these solutions. One that's quite interesting that I'll start with really is I noticed on the ICICI Bank one that it actually says this is the ICICI Bank chatbot. Is it best to tell customers that they're talking to a chatbot, or is it best to pretend it's a human, or what's the sort of, would you suggest as being the kind of best way to sort of deal with that, whether you want it to be as seamless as possible and appear to be human and then hand you to an agent, or do you let people know they're talking to the machine, or what do you think?
This is quite funny. Maybe I should do my own intelligent FAQ, because this is definitely a frequently asked question. And yeah, we get it in almost every webinar. So we believe that companies should tell their consumers, this is the chatbot and this is what I can help you with, because it might be that the chatbot cannot be identified as a chatbot, but also the chatbot cannot answer all the questions. So it might at some point transfer to human agent. At the latest, that's when consumers notice this is a chatbot. And it is something in our human nature that we would like to know that this is technology. So most consumers really want to know. And if you don't tell them and they find out, there will be a breach of trust. And reputation and trust is so important. So I wouldn't risk it. And we also conducted a survey. It was Australia, so I don't know how relevant it is for the UK scientifically, but my feeling is that it is very relevant. 87% of consumers in Australia said that companies should be obliged to tell their customers that they're talking with a chatbot. And California and the European Union, they're actually looking, but California has already published legislation that chatbots have to identify themselves as such, and the European Union is discussing whether that should be a law. So definitely the recommendation is to introduce the chatbot as a chatbot.
Interesting. I didn't know it had been legislated for or in the process of. That's one of those mysteries cleared up. There's a number of questions really around the same sort of idea, but Where should people start with this? I mean, where should they, with chatbots in particular, where should they start with the setup of chatbots? How do you start? If you've got a customer service department and maybe a small call center already, how do you where should you start with chatbots? Where do you put them? How do you plug them in? Do they work with your existing IT, or is it is it easy, or is it a complicated process to sort of get it to work with legacy systems?
Well, going with the customer expectations, and we're all consumers and customers, we have to make it easy. That's why I showed this evolutionary step from ICICI, really starting with a simple example that people and organizations perceive as manageable, because there's nothing worse than taking too much or up a project that's too big when the organization isn't ready. So starting small is really the recommendation, proving the value, and then going bigger. There's different ways you can get started. So I introduced the way to get started with the intelligent FAQ. But I also mentioned that RBS uses the chatbot internally. So there's different ways to do that, and it might be for some very risk-averse organizations. They might feel safer introducing this technology internally and building the trust in the technology. For example, either what RBS is doing or Belfius is a very similar use case, providing a chatbot to customer-facing employees to help them provide better customer service. We also see that use case with hotels, for example. So the hotel concierge has access to this type of technology. A second internal use case is a use case where you have HR and IT use a chatbot and live chat technology. So your users get in touch when they have a problem with their computer, whether they have an HR policy question. So those are different use cases. But I assume that on this webinar, we probably have not the group that's very interested in HR and IT chatbots, but rather the group that's interested in customer facing and optimizing customer service. So I would really recommend to go with the intelligent FAQ if you want to start small, or using this technology internally for your shop assistants, for example.
Okay, great. We've got a very good one here that's just popped up that sort of follows on from the one about whether you should let people know that you're talking to a chatbot or not. What's the best practice for transferring to a human agent if / when the chatbot keeps getting questions wrong, and how does it know?
Okay, so which order to answer those? What we saw in the example of, let me think. The example that we saw with ICICI, the second or third step where they have a chatbot widget. If a consumer asks a question, the chatbot doesn't know the answer because it just doesn't have the content in the knowledge base. It can say something, and the tone of voice depends completely on you. If you are a super modern retailer and you have very young clientele, it can be maybe a bit funnier, and include the terms that young people use. If you are a company that addresses the general market or an older audience, then you might choose a different tone of voice. But just tell them, I don't have an answer to your question, but my human colleagues, for example, are happy to help you with this. And then within the same window, offer them to go to live chat. Would you like to chat with a human advisor? And make it simple. So if you don't have a live chat team and you want those users to send an email or make a phone call, you can tell them, please give us a call and we'll be here for you in person. But ideally it's live chat. All they have to do is click on chat now, and they have a live chat advisor in the live chat. And speaking about live chat, this technology is not only available over chat. We spoke about that today, but you can also use this technology on channels like Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, or in other regions WeChat. So it's independent of the channel. The second part of the question, how do I know? Sorry, Paul, what was that?
No, I'd say it's interesting to know that it works on other messenger channels, because of course that's increasingly going to be how consumers contact brands.
Yes, but yeah, so for the second part of the question, how does the chatbot know, or how does a company know that a chatbot couldn't answer the question or couldn't answer it well? We use the data that we collect with the chatbot, so all the questions and the customer reactions, and we create what we call tiles. And the higher the tile in the display, the more often the question got asked. And if the tile is blue, you're good, no need to do anything. If the tile is red, it means that either the chatbot didn't know the answer, that's simple to determine, or the chatbot didn't answer the question well. And that can be determined either by direct customer feedback, thumbs up, thumbs down, or looking at what the customer asked next. From some follow-up questions, you can make the assumption that the last answer wasn't very good. So those are the ones that are being flagged through the AI technology. The other way to identify bad content is through the agents when they use Smart Advisor, and they see an answer and they say, well, this really should be improved.
Okay, brilliant, lovely. Right, we're running over time now. I think we've got time for one more, which is from me actually, because this is the thing that fascinates me is about how does all this work with web commerce, with voice commerce? You know, we've all got Alexas and similar these days. How does this sort of tie into for retailers and brands looking to sort of leverage voice commerce? Is it something that can help them?
So what comes out of the box is in the chatbot, I don't think I showed it, but you can hit a microphone icon so that instead of typing a question, you can ask a question. You will still get the answer in written format, but it saves you a lot of time typing. It's also possible to integrate with Alexa or Google Home through professional services. It depends on what you want to do, but yes, that is a possibility to integrate with those voice home assistants.
Brilliant, that's excellent. Right, well, we've been going for an hour. I think we probably need to sort of bring things to a halt there. That's been really interesting. If there are any other questions, I was going to say, sure, hopefully Sandra's address would appear on the screen, but if you go to the internet retailing website to, well, you'll get a link actually, those of you listening, to download a recording of this, and we'll make sure that the contact details are on there as well. So if you've got any other follow-up questions, do please send them along. But Sandra, thank you very much for that. It was really insightful and interesting. Enjoyed that a lot. Our audience, sadly, are all on mute, so you can't hear them clapping, but I'm sure they all are. But thank you very much for doing that, and look forward to talking again.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
You too, and thank you everyone for listening. Bye-bye.